Today's daf is daf Pei Vav, and we're up to the Mishnah, which is about 10 lines down from the top. Shlosha Gittin Psulim. There are three Gittin that are Pasul Rabbanon, and that means they're Pasul L'Chatchilu, but not B'di'evet. Im Niseis Havlad Kosher. If they went ahead based on this get, any of the three categories, then the Vlad is not a mamzer. The Mishnah, notice, doesn't say a word about Teitzei, whether or not we have to bust up the second marriage. And that's going to be machlokus in the Gemara. According to one Madiyama Lo Teitzei, except for the case of a shliach, we'll see later on, who did not say b'fanei nechta when a get that was sent from Medina Sayyam, there the din is in this says Teitzei. That's why it's not mentioned here in the Mishnah. So what are these three categories of Gittin Psulim D'Rabbanan? Number one, we have Kasav B'Ksav Yodo V'Ein Alav Eidim. So although on a Doraisa level, the Torah says V'Kasav L'Sefer Krisus, it sounds like his Ksiv is enough, but M'Rabbanan we require Chasimas Eidim, and there are no Chasimas on this Ksav Yodo. Then we have Yeshel of Eidim, but there are Eidim signed on the shtar, but V'Ein Bozman. They omitted the Zman. The Gemara says back on Daf Yud Zayin that they established Zman for one of two reasons. Let's say we'll go according to one opinion that Shem Yechap al Basa Choso. So in the omission of Zman, they get his Posel Midrabanon. And the third case is Yesh Bo Zman, but V'Ein Bo Ela Eid Echad. There's only one aid signed on the shtar. The Gemara is going to clarify, are we talking about a case of Ksav Yodo Shel Baal, or it was written by the Sofer, and therefore the Ksiva of the Sofer itself could serve as an aid, together with the aid that's signed, and therefore on a Deraisa level, we have no problem here with two aid. And then the Mishnah says, Hare Elu Shlosha Gittin Psulim, Vim Nisei Savlad Kosher. So we have here twice in the Mishnah, the number 3 is mentioned in the opening line of the Mishnah, Shlosha Gittin Psulin, and in the closing line, Shlosha Gittin Psulin. And the Gemara is going to try to analyze why the Mishnah felt compelled to write 3 to the exclusion of a 4th. And in all these cases, the Vlad, if she gets married based on the get, is kosher. He's not a mamzer. Now here, there's a very important Ran to explain why is the Vlad not a mamzer. And after all, we'll see soon that according to a mayor, if the get was not written ketakonis chachamim, kolam shanu madvesh tom chachama Vlad mamzer, and the Gemara is going to present one possibility that the Mishnah is to be attributed to Rabbi Meir. So why is the Vlad kosher? And the Ran, according to Ramban, says that we have various categories, basically 3 categories. Category number 1 is something that's noig begittin, but not in shtari momel. Like, for example, we'll have a case of kosav l'shem malchus acheres. In such a case, if he makes a change and he writes l'shem malchus acheres, Rabbi Meir holds kol hamashana, and therefore the vlad is a mamzer. The Chachamim are going to disagree with Rabbi Meir, and they're going to say Teitzei, but the Vlad is not a mamzer. And the reason for this is Shelo Yavo lahashvos Gittin l'shtaros. Since we don't have this kpeda in shtaros, we have to be more makpid in and machmir in the case of a get, because otherwise people say, well, look, if it's a din that doesn't apply to shtaros, then it probably is not so important in Gittin as well. Then we go to the second category, which is Dvar Manogim Gam Begittin V'Gam B'Shtaros. And again, in Shina Bahem, this is already Nira Hadover Kesheker. It's Mechse Keshikra. Like, for example, they were in the Mizrach, and he wrote they were in the Mairav. And in those cases, once again, the Vlad is going to be a mamzer. However, when you have something that's Shava Begitnu B'Shtaros, and therefore there's no extra need to be more machmir because somebody might mistakenly come to the conclusion that since in the shtaris it's not a problem, therefore Gittin it's not a problem. And he only did a shinui, but it's not a dover nira kisheker. There's no metsik kishikra. So in other shtaras other than Gittin, it would be okay lechatchila to use such a shtar. But in Gittin they were machmir, and they said lechatchila don't use such a get. But if he was shina by him, the flat is not a mamzer, even according to Rabbi Meir and according to Chachamim, we're going to even go as far as to say that im niseis lo teitze. Because since this applies in other stars as well, so it's not the best star, but nevertheless we don't have to be machmir and gittin to passel it, and therefore it's enough that we'll be machmir to say l'chadchili shouldn't use the get. We go on in the Mishnah. Rabbi Lezer Omer Afal Pisha Ein Olav Edim. Even in the case where there were no Edim signed on the shtar on the get, Ella Shenisano Olav B'fnei Edim, but rather were Edim Masira Kasha. The get is Kasha L'Chatchila, and that means because Rabbi Lezer holds Edim Masira Kar, saying you don't need Edim Chasima, and V'govim in a Chasim Mishubadim. And this shtar that was handed over in the presence of two Edom is valid even in Dini Momenos. For example, for Gvias Haksuba, and she can collect Haksuba even from Lekuchos, that's called Meshubadim, based on this get, because the Edom Asira will make the Krisus and not the Edom Chasima. She'ena Edom Chosmin al get el mishum tikkun. The only reason, according to Rabbi Lazar, that they established that the get should be signed by two Edom is only in case the Edei Masir are not available, or they died, or they went to Medina Sayyam. The Baal is going to come and be Mar on the get. We need Edei Chasima to reject the Taina of the Baal. Now, the Gemara is looking at the Lashon of Mishnah Shlosha Gittin Psulin V'Sul Lekon. There are no more Gittin that apostle Lechatchila, but of Niseis of Lad Kosher Va'ika get Yashan. And we learned about get Yashan back on Daf Ayin Tesam in Beis. If you recall, after the writing of the get, the Baal had Yichud with his wife. And such a get, it fits exactly into the three cases that are listed in our Mishnah. Why wasn't it mentioned? And where it says Hasam, there in the case of get Yashan, lo teitze, hacha teitze. Now, we mentioned that the Mishnah in Shlosha Gittin Psulin says in Nisei Savlad Kosher, but it doesn't mention whether Teitze or Lo Teitze. Do we break up the marriage to the second? And that indeed is going to be a machlokes in the Gemara here on Daf Ayin Pei Vavam and Peis. But the Gemara now is going according to the Man the Omer of Nisei's Teitze. And the Gemara is differentiating between a get Yashan, where Niseis Lo Teitze, whereas the three Gittin here are Teitze. So Hanich Laman the Omer de Hacha in these three Gittin mentioned at Mishnah Teitze. El Laman the Omer Hacha Lo Teitze. According to the other Laman the Omer who says that these Gittin Psulin D'Rabbanan are only L'Chatchila, but B'diavad it's fine. Is Michael and Meimar? Why didn't the Mishnah mention get Yashan if it's perfectly into this category? And the Gemara answers Hasam Ti Nasi L'Chatchila. In the case of a get Yashan, if let's say the Baal is not available and he went out to Medina Sayyam and we cannot substitute a second get for the first, then give this get, even though it's a get Yashan. But Hach, in these three cases, then Allah is Lo Ti Nasi L'Chatchila. And even though B'di'evet Lo Teitze, but nevertheless Chatchila, we would never allow her to get married based on any of these three Gittin. Just that B'di'evet Lo Teitze. Frek the Gemara Va'ika get Kereach. Right, get Kereach is a special get for Kohanim who wanted to divorce their wives. And they fold up the get and they sew up parts of it and then On each fold, they sign an aid on the outside of the get, and the number of folds should be exactly equivalent to the number of the aidim signed, because on each kricha there's one signature, and yet we have a get kereach where there are more folds than signatures. And the halacha is based on the Mishnah on Pei Aleph Amud Beis, holcha v'niseis beget teitze. And therefore, according to Mani Omer, that in our three cases in our Mishnah of Gittin Psulim and Niseis Teitze, then why wasn't Get Kereach added to the list? And Gemara answers, Hasam, in the case of Get Kereach Havlad Mamzer, not only are we busting up the marriage, and in Niseis Teitze, according to that Mani Omer, but nevertheless, the Vlad is a kosher, and that's explicit in the Mishnah. But in the case of Get Kerech, the Vlad is a mamzer, so the Rabbanan completely disqualified the get. Vlad kosher. Rabbi Meir. Okay, you can reconcile our Mishnah with Rabbi Meir, who holds Kol Amshanim Nagdesh Tov Chacham Begittin Havlad Mamzer, and therefore he would hold that B'diavad the Vlad is a mamzer, and if we get Kereach, the Vlad is a mamzer. The Rabbanan hold that the Vlad is not a mamzer, and the Rabbanan only passel the get midrabanan. It's only a psul get midrabanan. There's no Vlad mamzer here. Is Michael Meimer, so get Kereach is a Vlad kosher, and therefore, if we want to reconcile our Mishnah with the Chachamim, we're going to ask a question: why did the Mishnah omit get Kereach as the fourth category? And the Gemara answers Hasam and get Kereach. We're going to introduce that Mandi Omar that we'll have on Amud Beis that holds in an Am Mishnah. It's only lechatchil that we don't allow giving the get in those three cases, but rather in this case lo teitze. B'diavad will rely on the get, and that's not so in the case of a get kereach. So Gemara says Hanichal Mandi Omar de hacha lo teitze. If we assume that in our Mishnah the three Gittin Psulim and Niseis lo teitze, everything fits beautifully. El Lamadi Omar Hacha Teitze, that if she gets married based on this get or any of the three Gittin that are listed in the Mishnah, then we bust up the marriage as my equal, and maybe then get Kirech is equal to all these three Gittin in our Mishnah. Teitze Af B'diavad of Vlad Kosher. Why wasn't that included in our Mishnah? That would jack up the number from 3 to 4. And the Gemara answers, B'makusha lo kamayri. Our Mishnah is not dealing with a special din of a get that's kosher, but the Rabbanan required special requirements for a Gerushay Gerushay Kohen. That psul of get kerech is in a category of itself. It really is not, it's not, shall we say, to be integrated with the other three psulim, which are psulim in terms of the get and its edus and the way it was written and the way it was signed. Here it's a special category as far as kahuna is concerned. Affecting Gemara va'ika shalom malchus. Let's say the get was written for the sake of a malchus that's not a malchus. Or, for example, it's Rome or it's Greek, and then you have a case where you have a malchus that doesn't exist in the world anymore, like Modai. So therefore, in that case, the Mishnah already established back on Daf Ayin Tesam and Beis that the get is possible, but the Vlad is kosher. Why wasn't that included here in the 3 and jack it up to 4? And where it says Hasam Teitze, Hachalo Teitze, where it's now going according to the Madi Omer, that in our Mishnah, the din is Lo Teitze, whereas in the case of Shalom Malchus, the din is that the get, if she gets married based on this get, she'll have to get a divorce from her second husband. We're going to bust up the marriage. This works out that in our Mishnah, if she gets married with this get, then the din is lo teitze, and therefore it's not similar to the case of Malchus and altogether, where the din is niseis teitze. According to the other man, who says teitze, Michael and Meimar, that the case of a get that was written with the wrong malchus is equal to all the 3 Gittin that Psulim in our Mishnah. Why isn't it mentioned anywhere? It says Mukum La Kid Rabbi Meir. He says, why are you assuming that the three Gittin Psulim Teitze, according to this Mani Omar, is according to the Rabbanim? Maybe Teitze means we're going according to Rabbi Meir. And he holds that any get that's not written Kitakonis Chacham is possible, and if she gets married based on that get, the Vlad is a mamzer. But in the case of Psul Sholem Malchus, Havlad mamzer, Hoch Havlad kosher. So that in the case of a Shinui Shalonasa Ketatchos Chachamim, Rabbi Meir holds that the get is possible and the Vlad is a mamzer, like for example Shalom Malchus. But in our Mishnah, even Rabbi Meir would hold that the Vlad is kosher. Why does it say Shlosha Gittin? The minyan in the Reish is coming to exclude get Yochon, get Kerech, and Shalom Malchus. That there the din is not that the get is possible and the Vlad is kosher, like the three Gittin, but rather according to Rabbi Meir, the Vlad is a mamzer. But Minyone the Seif L'Muti Mai L'Sanya, the Minyone, the Sefer is coming to exclude Hamevi get Medinas Hayam. The Shliach brings a get, the son of love lo Omer Fanei Nechtam, and now the woman takes this get and she gets married based on this get. Is Yotzi Vavlad Mamzer Divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says we're going to bust up the marriage to the second Baal, and the Vlad that was born from that second marriage is a mamzer according to Rabbi Meir because you're Meshanami. Chacham made a Vlad mamzer. Keitzad yaseh. How could she be muteres to get married? L'chatchili tlena. The shliach takes back the get, amen, from her. V'yachsav yitnei lo b'fnei eidim v'yomar. This time get it right. V'fanei nechtam. So when the Mishnah adds a minyan, a number to the Sefer, it's coming to exclude the case and tell us that this is like the Brisa, that the Shita Rabbi Meir is that Kol Shinui is the Vlad is a mamzer. But if the Shliach didn't say B'fanei nechtam, then the Vlad is a mamzer. The Mishnah says, "Kasav v'ksav yodo v'enolav v'edim amarav ksav yodo ahe." Who exactly is Rav commenting on? Which part of the Mishnah? In which case, Rav is saying it's not a get that's written by the Sofer, but rather by ksav yodo. If we're going to say that Rav's comment here is going back to the Reish, which says Kosav B'Ksav Yodo V'Einol of Eidim Pshita. It says that it was written by Ksav Yodo. So what Rav is just reiterating what it says explicitly in the Mishnah. Ela Amitziyosa. Let's check this out. Maybe Rav's comment is going on the Bava Emtsois of the Mishnah. It says Yesh Lo Eidim Ein Bozman. So the Mishnah says Yeshal of Eidim. So it can't be that Rav is saying that it's Ksav Yodo Shel Baal and there's no Eidim. Ela Aseifa. We have to assume that Rav's comment should be attached to the third din mentioned in the Mishnah Yesh Bo Zman V'Ein Lo Bo Ela Eidecha. So what is Rav adding here to the third comment of the Mishnah? And here we turn to Pei Vav and Beis. Rav is saying the Vlad is kosher dafka if it's ksav yodo v'yed, but if it's ksav sofer v'yed lo. So that means that the Mishnah did not say that the Vlad is kosher if there was ksav yodo v'yed. But if it's Kav Yodo Shel Sofer V'Eid, then according to Rabbi Meir, the Vlad is a mamzer. Well, that's the shita of Rav. We'll continue with Shmuel